Do with her Bible. Thank you so much, Bev. Will you pray with me? Holy God, may the words of my mouth and the thoughts of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. It's not fair. That's mine. How come you get that and I don't? Mom, Esau's not sharing. Dad, Jacob's trying to take what's mine. It's not fair. How many of us as children have uttered these words? Or as adults, maybe we haven't said them, but we've thought them. How many of us have heard these words or something like them said by our students, children, nieces, nephews, or grandchildren? As we saw this morning with the food exercise, young people have a keen sense of what is fair and not fair. Who gets the biggest cookie or juiciest slice of watermelon? Whose birthday party was better last year? Whose events parents attend more consistently? Who is loved more? For me, the story of Jacob and Esau has always been a story about fairness, or rather, unfairness. One son is born stronger than the other. One brother is adored by their father, the other preferred by their mother. One is a skilled hunter. The other is quiet, sticking close to home, tending to household tasks. One is born with a birthright, the other with little more to hold on to than his brother's heel. Two brothers struggling, competing, wrestling with each other even before they're born. The whole setup seems unfair to me, unjust. And parental favoritism, well, that just makes things worse. I'll be honest, I can't help but feel angry that Isaac and Rebekah put their sons in this position, that they add their love to the things that these brothers cannot share. And yet I need to step back and realize there's a lot this story is not telling us. I wonder, does Esau bully his younger brother for being a homebody? His taunts echoed by their playmates? Does Esau consistently win the childhood competitions of speed, strength, agility, and endurance? I wonder, does Rebekah develop a soft spot for Jacob when she sees how Esau treats him? Or when she sees the preferential treatment Isaac gives Esau? Does her affection for Jacob grow as this son consistently sees her needs, as he makes a point of helping her with the cooking and cleaning, with the task of tending animals and gardens? How early does Rebekah begin to favor Jacob? Perhaps she actually favors Jacob first, and this is what causes Isaac to favor Esau. Maybe Isaac is remembering his own mother's animosity toward his half-brother Ishmael, and so he loves Esau best, as if this will somehow right his parents' wrong. Maybe Esau the hunter reminds Isaac of the brother that he lost, of Ishmael, the skilled bowsman and hunter himself. Maybe Isaac lavishes upon this son, upon Esau, the love his own father refused his elder brother. Maybe Isaac is in some screwed up way, trying to make up for his parents' mistakes. We just don't know. The story does not tell us. We only know that Rebekah loved Jacob and Isaac loved Esau. And this favoritism adds a layer to the competition and conflict between the brothers. There is, of course, also the practice of birthright, which has to do with both position and inheritance. By birthright, the firstborn son, and it is son, it's not daughter, inherits the leadership of the family and the judicial authority of his father. It may be that the birthright also entitles the eldest son to a double portion of the paternal inheritance, twice as much Cheerios as everybody else, regardless of whether or not he's hungrier. This is no small thing when land, property, honor, authority determine one's lot in life. Yet when Esau comes in from the field famished, he almost unthinkingly gives up his birthright. What good is it if I'm going to die of hunger? Doesn't this seem like a foolish thing to say? He just throws away all of this property and authority and power. What isn't the story telling us? Is Esau simply being impulsive, or could something else be going on? Maybe he really does feel like he's going to collapse of hunger. Maybe he's hypoglycemic, in which case needing something to eat may literally prevent him from thinking straight and making good decisions. We just don't know. And Jacob? A birthright seems an awfully high price for a bowl of lentils, a bowl of pottage, even if your older brother has been tormenting you your whole life. Couldn't they split the birthright? Maybe Jacob could ask that their father honor them equally. But no, Jacob wants the whole thing, all or nothing, and maybe a birthright can't be shared. Regardless, it all seems pretty sneaky, manipulative, and unjust on Jacob's part, taking advantage of his brother's hunger in this way. Talk about a dysfunctional family. Talk about unfairness. Talk about injustice. There's no sign of honesty, integrity, kindness, compassion, or love. No sign of any of those things here. Just a whole lot of going around each other, a whole lot of taking whatever you can get. Who cares that this is family? And if we look back, we see that the dysfunction begins at least a generation earlier with Isaac's family of origin. Remember how Isaac's father casts Ishmael and Hagar out into the wilderness? Or, and this is the text that Reverend Laura Nelson preached on, Abraham and Isaac's journey up the mountain and the near sacrifice of Isaac. Talk about childhood trauma. Talk about dysfunction. Talk about injustice. And if we look ahead to the next generation, the dysfunction continues. Jacob also has a favorite son. We all remember Joseph from our early days in Sunday school. You remember coloring in his rainbow coat that his father gives him because he's the favorite? Do you remember how Joseph is the one who dreams that all his older brothers will literally bow down before him? And then Joseph has the audacity to tell his older brothers about that dream. Well, at that point, they've had it. Plan number one is murder. Thankfully, Joseph's eldest brother, Reuben, steps in. And so instead of murder, Joseph's older brothers just sell him into a lifetime of slavery. Dysfunction, injustice. How can our theme this week possibly be fairness and justice when these stories are so full of the exact opposite? Injustice seems to be a family trait, passed from one generation to the next like a mantle, like a birthright. What hope does this family have of pulling out of this intergenerational dysfunction? What hope do they have of reconciliation, healing, much less justice? And I don't mean the justice of punishment, the justice of an eye for an eye. I mean the justice of making right what once was wrong. I mean the justice of loving our neighbor, or in this case, our sibling, as ourselves. I dare say when we look at injustice in our world, we can ask the same questions. Systems of injustice carry from one generation to the next. We hand them off like a mantle, a birthright, whether we mean to or not. What hope do we have of pulling ourselves out of such dysfunction? What hope do we have of reconciliation, healing, and justice? But wait a minute. There's good news. With God, there is always good news. And the good news is that the story is not over yet. Neither our story nor the story of Jacob and Esau. Yes, in Jacob and Esau's story, and probably in our story too, more pain will come, more deception, more estrangement, but that's not the end of the story either. Years later, Jacob will return to the home of his birth. He will return to Esau seeking reconciliation, seeking to make right what he once made so very wrong. In Joseph's story, Joseph gains power and meets his brothers unexpectedly, and there is a chance for reconciliation there too. The story is not over yet. Not Jacob and Esau's story, not Joseph and his brother's story, not our story. As Dr. Martin Luther King puts it, the arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. When it appears that injustice will continue past from one generation to the next, we remember God's promise that the story is not over yet. The story of COVID and how we choose to care for one another and ourselves, that story is not over yet. The story of white supremacy and dismantling racism, it's not over yet. The story of how we as a congregation may include and affirm LGBTQ plus people, that story's not over yet. The story of how we care for the neighbors who sleep on our church's doorstep, it's not over yet. The story of how we as individuals and as a congregation seek to make our communities more loving, more compassionate, more just, that story is not over yet. And neither is your story. Your story of this time with its grief and its loss. Your story with its resilience and strength, with its trauma, harm done and harm experienced. Your story with the hope in the midst of hardship, with its resentments and broken relationships. Your story with its resurrection and new life, its love and its joy, it is not over yet. This is good news. The arc of the universe is long and it bends toward justice. Each week, we have someone share a little bit about the theme we're reflecting on. And I can't tell you how week after week, what people share is better than anything I could have scripted for them. And Heather's sharing this morning so beautifully invites us to think about how we engage with fairness and justice. She invites us to venture beyond looking at what is unfair and unjust to us and the people in our immediate circles. She invites us beyond recognizing and acknowledging the injustice in our world. She invites us to join her in venturing into discernment. How is God calling us to respond? She invites us to venture into action. What will we do to change the injustices we see? Because the story is not over yet. Because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Because our liberation, our healing, our wholeness is tied up with the liberation and healing and wholeness of all God's beloved children. And what does the Lord require of us but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with our God? May it be so. Amen.